world surrounded by franchises, reboots, and shared universes. An elite team of podcasters will risk body and soul to investigate the depths of intellectual properties, one multiverse, subgenre, and trend at a time. Who are we? We're the IP Squad. Welcome back to the IP Squad and our ongoing investigation into the Alien and Predator franchises and the franchise that they become together. I'm John Campbell, and of course, I feel like appropriate for this episode, the only way to introduce my partner on this is by saying, Gogoni, you son of a bitch!
I should have known they'd call you in on this one, John Campbell.
And then we clap, high five, and also kind of arm wrestle?
Well, look. It was the 80s. We always had to prove who was the most machismo-ish. And obviously, neither of us is a sexual tyrannosaurus. So.
Sexual tyrannosaurus. Oh, man. Is this the most testosterone ever put on screen?
I mean, it is definitely attempting to, right?
Yeah.
Because so many memes and, like, what people think of as like burly men doing manly things kind of like stem from this film in a lot of ways.
Well, because this movie is nothing but sweat, muscles, guns, and blood, you know?
Yeah. We're talking about Predator.
1987's The Predator. Only 1 year after last week's movie. So, you know, we jump 1 year from Aliens to this. And I feel like this took a certain thing that's in Aliens, and then we're just like, oh, we're just going to wholly focus on that.
I had such a reversal of emotions this morning because, like, I was waking up and I was like, all right, bright and early, got to watch a movie for the podcast. What's the next movie on the docket? Well, we just watched Alien, so clearly I need to watch Alien 3 next.
Oh,
and then I stopped and went, oh, wait, no. I get to watch Predator. Because I don't have to punish myself.
No, that's the thing that's so interesting about this. We get two aliens, two predators, and then we start swapping them back and forth a little bit more. But yeah, that's right. No, what a treat. If you think, man, talk about a reversal of emotions. If you think you're going to watch Alien 3, you are dragging yourself out of bed. I got to watch this.
Well, there's like a dog's going to die. It's going to be bad.
That one's grim, and it ruins everything about the same way. Oh, wait. Predator? Well, Predator. I gotta say, I think, and I'll put this in a caveat, of course, because film fans, you know, whatever. But for what it is, this is kind of a perfect movie. Like, I think in terms of like what should be B, and I say because it's an A studio production, but a B movie concept executed just expertly.
It is, like you say, a movie that is kind of elevating its own schlock genre roots, right? Mm-hmm. In a way that comes in the actors that we have as our central cast, in the director in the form of John McTiernan, the script here by Jim and John Thomas.
And Shane Black.
Are they related?
They're brothers, yeah, but okay. Also Shane Black.
But also Shane Black, who is one of the stars of the film.
Yep, and there's a reason he's one of the stars of the film.
Because he was basically rewriting stuff on set.
Yeah, the famous story of that is Fox didn't want to pay him to rewrite it, so McTiernan goes, why don't I just put him in the movie, and then if he's already on set, I can go, hey, do you think you could write some better dialogue for this scene, Shane Black?
And then he did.
Yes, he did. He got, of course, no credit for that, but yes, Shane Black. A lot of the dialogue specific. I think a lot of the plot is the Thomas brothers, and then a lot of the dialogue is Shane Black.
Because like when you say this is for what it is, a perfect movie. What it
Yeah.
is a combination of things that creates like the perfect synthesis of action film in 1987.
Oh, 100%. It starts as basically a Commando sequel, uh,
Yeah.
and that then turns into a horror slash survival movie. And that's the cool thing I love too about the last third of the movie is not only is it I have to defeat this monster, but I have to use the elements and my knowledge as a warrior to build traps and such. You know, it becomes the technology versus low tech, just guy with a strategic mind.
The rewatching this film, it had been a while since I rewatched the original Predator.
You and I
I
are different
think the
people.
one I no, but just like
Yeah.
the one of the Predator films I go back to, I feel like Predators is the one I've rewatched the most
Predators
because
is
I
great.
have the most fun with that one.
Predators is great. I think that's one that when we get to, we're both big fans of. But this is a pretty much an annual watch for me. Not
Sure,
on any kind
totally.
of conscious level, but this movie's in my bones.
But something I was struck by in this rewatch is, and I mentioned this before we started recording, the sort of like narrative sleight of hand that this film uses to sort of shift us from one tone to the other. When you say starting off as an action movie, like that first raid on the guerrilla camp could be out of Commando,
Oh,
right?
100%.
Easily.
And it's so interesting. A lot of the people involved in this movie have just come off making Commando. Like this is
Right.
Schwarzenegger. That's the movie made for this. Also produced by Joel Silver. Bill Duke, who plays Mac in this, is also one of the bad guys in that movie. Like they pretty much just took a lot of that crew and stuff and just moved to this. So yeah, it absolutely does feel like Arnold's spitting one-liners. Stuff is blowing up. Cars are crashed into stuff. We're just mowing people down.
But even right off the bat, though, in this film, because after we get through our first intro scene where we set up the plot, I clocked it at like 19 minutes into this movie. We get our first infrared camera shot that lets us know that this isn't what it appears to
Well,
be.
I mean, the movie does start with, as well, in outer space with a ship.
That's true.
So, I mean, they do, and I that's always one of those things where I'm like, I go back and forth on whether that's a good thing that they do that.
I think it is because, but this speaks to like the real deep nerd in me, right? And
Yeah.
obviously we'll get into like the nitty gritty of some of this stuff when we start having to combine these franchises.
Because I do.
But the amount of like world building, quote unquote, they do around like what is involved with the Predator itself.
Yeah.
I think it starts with that sequence, and it's so like rich with detail without being super like explainy. It is total show don't tell.
I think yes, I agree, and this like the Alien, like Birth of the first two Alien movies, and both franchises, especially as they collide into each other, will eventually get bogged down in this. But the first two Alien movies and this movie do a great job of establishing a lot with very little, just through action, just through like, ooh, they give you just a taste enough for you to start speculating before we're gonna. And more so the Alien than the Predator franchise, but the Predator franchise will also be guilty of it before we just like start drowning in lore and mythos and world building.
Yeah. Because when you ask whether or not that first opening scene with the spaceship is necessary for this film, I think it characterizes the Predator in such a specific way that really helps encapsulate the final confrontation between Arnold and the Predator, in that you see this big spaceship heading towards Earth, but it doesn't land on Earth. It just ejects one little pod, and that is what we're dealing with in the whole film.
And we come to what will come. I do think in the long run, it works for it, especially as a franchise. The only reason I say like could it not is it does, although it like the infrared, because I do like the way that McTiernan occasionally introduces the infrared or the Predator in its camouflage state to give you this sense that something's lurking on the fringe of this movie. But it's sort of the thing about the spaceship, the alien thing. Immediately you start from, oh, there's going to be an alien in this movie. And that's why I say I go back and forth, because whether or not then that's how much is a complete rug pulled out from under you when this movie stops being a soldier movie. But I do think the thing that's really good is you do kind of forget, because you then immediately go from that to this wild bunch of military dudes landing a helicopter. Arnold introduced with a stogie in his mouth. Oh, has Arnold ever looked cooler than he does in this movie?
I mean, every stage of this movie, as he's like slowly being stripped of all of his, he starts off looking like an action figure, and he slowly
Yeah.
strips down until he is literally a man made of clay.
Yeah. And literally, he was covered in potter's clay, is what he's actually wearing at the end of the movie. Which I gotta
Hmm.
say, reading about and I also watched the little half-hour documentary that's on the Blu-ray. Um, this movie sounds like a fucking nightmare to make. Like, this movie sounds just physically awful to film.
John, are you telling me that the dense, thickest jungles of South America are not a place that is conducive to a film set?
Oh God, it just sounds. I mean, they talked to the cinematographer, and he goes, literally, there was nowhere flat to put the camera. Everything was at some kind of angle, right? So automatically touch. But we're already starting literally off kilter, and then yeah, you had leeches and bugs and horrific temperatures. And then for the last chunk of the movie where it's just Arnold, he's coated in potter's clay and now it's freezing. He's in the water. They talk about they could not get him to stop shivering because it just sounds like a nightmare to make. Everybody's like, yeah, we had a good time, but also it does sound like they kind of did go to war in a certain amount.
Nobody actively died on set of
Correct.
this film, as
That
far
is
as I
correct.
know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But some of the stories that come out from the different actors, and especially when dealing with John McTiernan, the storied history of John McTiernan has been told elsewhere.
Yes.
But
he
he can be a bit of a prickly fella.
He is a guy with a vision. And if you, or just the elements in general, compromise that vision, he's gonna be a little unhappy about it. And also maybe a little bit of a paranoid guy, and look into what sent him to jail, because that paranoia is the big reason he went to jail.
Yeah. That has been discussed on other podcasts.
There's also a whole documentary about it. It's really interesting. He's a fascinating guy. But this begins what I think is, because this is similar to Ridley Scott. He is coming off of one fairly small scale, indie movie before this called Nomads with Pierce Brosnan. So this is his second feature film, and he gets handed a big budget star vehicle.
Yeah, and he follows this up with what many argue to be like the perfect action film, which is Die Hard.
Yeah, I mean, Die Hard's a masterpiece, right? Like, is it the greatest action movie ever made? It's certainly in the conversation. It's in the 5 on the short list, no question. The run of Predator to Die Hard to Hunt for Red October is basically unimpeachable, as far as those are 3 pretty much perfect action films.
And look, we all have our preferences. Some of us prefer giant 7-foot tall alien hunter creatures that stalk through the jungle, and some prefer Cold War espionage and submarines.
Yeah. And some of us love both with all their heart. But and then, I mean, the guy could, you must be a fan of this. The next Schwarzenegger McTiernan. We're the right age for Last Action Hero, right?
Last Action Hero was introduced to me at the pivotal moment when I began understanding the separation between the viewer and the story, right?
Yeah.
It broke my brain in the perfect way that I could encapsulate the meta nature of an audience member interacting with the story that is being told to them.
This is an interesting thing, because when it's sort of like that's a real generational separating movie, I find, because it's sort of like if you were like a teen to adult when it came out, you kind of hate it, and it was hated at the time. But I find that people in our age range are like, oh, that movie was awesome, in the craze, that because it broke our brains. I still stand by that movie was ahead of it was the wrong time for it. Because I feel like now it's exactly the kind of humor that permeates everything, like the Deadpool movie, stuff like that. The meta nature of stuff is omnipresent in a way that just wasn't in the mid-90s.
The modern version of Last Action Hero is Free Guy.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
And that movie is doing a lot of the same stuff in terms of the story it's telling, and take it or leave it, but they're entertaining as hell.
Absolutely. And Free Guy was a massive hit, and Last Action Hero was a huge flop. Because I just don't think people just didn't have the mindset for it in 1994. It also opened
Yeah.
against Jurassic Park, which was a massive
That
mistake.
probably doesn't help.
No, that was not a great call. But we also I mentioned that only because but it is McTiernan, Schwarzenegger, and a Shane Black screenplay. Which it's
You'd
very.
think a recipe made in heaven.
I mean, they thought that at the time. I think it has since been. Like I said, there's a huge section that loves that movie. If you love that, if you're in our generation, that and Hook are classics when they both bombed at the time.
Well, and what's weird about Last Action Hero specifically, and I know we're totally off Predator at this point.
Well, yeah, but we're still in the McTiernan. Yeah. We'll be back.
I watched it as such a counterpoint to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right?
Yeah.
Like, it felt like they were riffing in a similar vein and both speaking to things that, like, I was only just beginning to comprehend. Like, obviously, the cartoons that Who Framed Roger Rabbit is riffing on predate us, but we're still a part of our childhood in terms of, like, cartoon reruns and whatnot. And the same is true for the action movies that Last Action Hero was riffing on, in that, like, those weren't the sorts of movies being made when we were young, but they were the sorts of movies we were watching when we were young.
Yeah.
Because they were on cable and we had VHS copies of them.
That's 100% the thing. I always talk about this. People talk about, because you know this, and this will bring us back to Predators. Like, I'm always talking about 80s movies. I'm like, yeah, because I was a 90s kid, but the library of films came from the previous decade, whether it was...
Yep.
Yeah, because we for sure had Predator. I mean, here's the thing about Predator, and I think I've shared this on other things, because I don't know the first time I saw this movie. This movie has always been part of my life. It's just been a ubiquitous thing. This is one of my dad's favorite movies, so it's just always been on. Like, it just exists.
I have a distinct memory from my childhood. In my childhood home, we had this basement that was like half finished that my dad had kind of like converted into something of a bar.
Yes.
And this was before you and I had become friends, John. Not the house you knew me in like high school.
Oh wow, because that also had a half finished basement, or
right.
at least a
I
lower...
lived in that one.
Okay, wow, that was what I was picturing. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
No. This was a totally different setup.
Oh, okay.
And he had turned like the back half of it into like a bar area. So like he had a full-sized bar and like a liquor cabinet stocked back there and a dartboard off to one side.
Okay.
And
total what we would now call a man cave, but
total man cave.
Yeah.
On either side of the dartboard, there was the iconic poster from Terminator with Arnold on it and the sunglasses and the one red eye.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the dartboard was the Predator poster. Still Arnold with this like washed out background and him slightly pixelated. Like these were like indelibly burned into my brain as a child.
I mean, that was we didn't have the posters, but that was the VHS collection my dad had. Nary a movie didn't star Schwarzenegger or Stallone. There's a reason that I have such affinity for both of those guys. You know, when I was growing up in the summertime when it wasn't school, my dad and I would just stay up watching these movies. And yeah, they were always pretty much Arnold and Sly. So, you know, these are the classics to me. And with Terminator and Predator always being the like cream of the crop, baby.
And Terminator was the scary one, and this was the fun one, but they're basically kind of the same movie.
Well, which is interesting because that's the thing of this movie is, I think, supposed to be scary, but it's just it's scary in a comic booky way, right? Like it's monsters, but it's so badass.
But I think the scariness comes from these are the archetypes of like, call it toxic if you want, but masculinity as portrayed by 80s action films. Yes. And they're losing their minds by the end of this film.
Well, here's the thing about the McTiernan entrance into this is McTiernan, it's interesting that he became a guy who made, you know, these movies that, especially this first one, that's a macho action movie, because he always, and I think this is the reason his stuff still stands out, he always kind of wanted to take the piss out of it. He's not a guy who bought into the rah-rah jingoism of the all-American hero. So to him, if you listen to McTiernan talk about this movie, he goes, oh, this is me talking about how fucking stupid the American military is after Vietnam, because we're just a bunch of guys armed to the teeth who think we can go into a situation, kick ass, and then we get our asses handed to us. That was his view of this Predator movie was, I'm going to take all these guys who think they can stop anything and just start having them get wiped out. And it's sort of like,
absolutely.
and then you have Joel Silver, who's the producer of this and Die Hard and the Lethal Weapon movies, the king of action. Once again, basically formed all of my favorite movies. All my favorite movies are either produced by him or Jerry Bruckheimer. And he's the guy going, I want bigger guns. I want a scarier monster. And so, and shout out to the two friends over at Blank Check, because they also bring this up. That is what makes this movie so interesting. Is you have two guys with very different approaches to this material that is very much a B movie idea, and coming together. You have one guy trying to turn into the ultimate summer blockbuster, and another guy who thinks it's this like indictment about the American military complex. And they make this very interesting, very unique piece of film.
Yeah. Well, obviously, like, this is a reaction to Vietnam. We've also got the Iran-Contra stuff happening around this time.
Yeah,
like,
the 80s is a real shift in the view of the American military.
Yeah. Well, we go from this, like, well, with the American can-do democracy attitude, we can shape global policy to be a better fit to, but then, like, the slow realization that we are being the interlopers in situations where maybe we don't have a right to be.
Well, because it's so interesting that Joel Silver, who also produced Lethal Weapon, which was written by Shane Black, that I think people forget that first movie is all about Vietnam. It's all about the darkness of Vietnam and the dark shit that the government was up to, and sort of the sins of Vietnam coming back on people. You know, these movies are getting, the Rambo movies obviously are then you had Chuck Norris, who was still doing the missing in action stuff, which was much more rah America. But a lot of the action movies are getting darker. Even this movie with the Carl Weathers character gets into the U.S. government fucks these guys over.
Yeah. And that feels like where the tension of this movie is, right? Like, where the line gets drawn between there is an alien that is the predator hunting these guys, versus these are guys that are misled by their government to enact a mission that was not what they thought it was.
Right. And that's sort of, I think, is kind of the key to the 80s action movie take on this stuff. Is these are always talking about the soldier is the victim, right? The soldier is the blue collar workaday guy trying to do his job, and these forces are screwing him over. It's still, it's still very pro-American soldier, but not government or military apparatus.
Right. And obviously this thought process has developed over time, and it starts like in the early 20th century with like World War I, World War II, where this term of the meat grinder is brought up, and they even mention it in this film as well, whereas like these are expendable assets that the generals see as something to be spent, not necessarily lives to be valued.
100%. And that's very much what it feels like when they send these guys out there. I do like, of course, that even Carl Weathers doesn't know about the Predator. I mean, once it gets into that, it's not quite to the level of the Alien movies. But it is,
where like the company is totally aware of what they're sending their people into. Yeah.
But yeah, it's still he is the government man. He's the betrayer, right? He's the soldier that went corporate. Unlike the rest of these guys, Dutch and his boys. Let's talk about Dutch and his boys, because what an ensemble, and what specifically a 1987 ensemble this is.
Yeah, 100%.
Because of course,
two future governors and a bunch of other actors.
Yeah, two future governors and a guy. I would have voted for Carl Weathers for governor had he run. I'll just say. So we've got Arnold as Dutch, the ultimate American hero. Always one of those funny things that like the greatest American soldier is a guy from Austria.
I just once I want a movie that like somebody goes, wait, you're from California?
Yeah.
What?
Born and raised California. That was always the joke. Was that guy was and actually from all intents and purposes a pretty decent governor. But yet could never correctly pronounce the name of his state. California. He always really hit that I. He really had California. But yeah. Anyway, Arnold is just. I can't imagine this movie working as well unless it was maybe Stallone. Like the key is it does start with like, oh, the guy we know just lays waste to bad guys is our hero, right? Like,
yeah,
because that's
it's because it's building on the metatextual like ness of. I mean, the poster says it all, right?
Yeah.
Like right at the top of the poster is not the movie title; it is the name Schwarzenegger.
I mean, talk about 1980s. This is really the era of the movie star, right? The same thing with the Stallone poster too. It is just the last name, giant letters, bigger than the title often, and I mean, this is I think around the same time. Is this? I'm gonna look to see what the Stallone movie in '87 was. I want to say it's Cobra.
87,
and I feel
Cobra
like
is 85, isn't it?
They're all in. This is all in that run.
Yeah.
But whatever that is gonna have the same poster.
Sure.
87 is over the top.
The arm wrestling movie.
Oof. Yeah, Cobra's 86.
86, okay.
But that is Stallone over the top.
Of
Arnold
course.
Arnold came out this year. We'll just say that Arnold won 87 because this is also firmly in the time where they're going back and forth. Who's the bigger star?
Totally.
But so no, there's no question that that's the case. But then Stallone comes roaring back in 88 with Rambo 3. So don't worry.
I don't know about roaring, but yeah, in 87, Schwarzenegger has Predator and The Running Man, which obviously The Running Man, a rockier film, at least in terms
But
of
I
like.
love it.
But it is classically remembered. Yes.
Also with Jesse Ventura, he's in both of these. Because we do have, as mentioned, the other governor in this, Jesse the Body Ventura, as he was known, of course, in the wrestling world. How you doing?
Sure.
The only guy in this movie with an actual military background. Jesse Ventura was a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, but like in terms of being the avatar of toxic masculinity, that is Jesse Ventura in this film.
Yeah, I like in the little making of thing that's on the disc, he is like, I thought he was a really fun character. I thought he was the most interesting of the guys. I thought he had the best stuff to say.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he does get one of the most famous lines in action movie history in this, right? Which is, I ain't got time to bleed.
Yeah, you're hit, man. You're going to be okay?
Yeah.
Ain't got time to bleed.
Which is a super badass line. Like
the one-liner ratio, and this is a Shane Black thing, obvious.
All of them came from, they had to have, because that's obviously what he becomes famous for.
Yeah, like just in the opening raid on the guerrilla camp, we have knock knock as he literally kicks in the door.
My favorite is him throwing the knife in the guy and going, stick around.
Stick around.
Stick around. I mean, it's not a like comedy one-liner, but of course one of the other famous things, if it bleeds, we can kill it.
Right. Well, that's the thing about this film as well. Again, we talk about the narrative. I keep using the term sleight of hand, but that kind of is what it is.
Oh,
imagine the three card Monty, like where you're switching the queen around, like find the queen, find the queen. What this movie is doing is shuffling the cards around as we progress through the film to the point where eventually it stops being this like jingoistic rah rah America, bravo, our boys fighting these people in the jungle, and slowly transforms into we don't understand what's going on. It's driving these people mad, and the only way to combat it is by reducing yourself to the like hunter gatherer state.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the cool things about this that I love in the narrative progression of it, right? Is this idea about like the more he has to win this thing stripped of all of his tech versus a thing that's got fucking infrared and laser guns and all this stuff, and ultimately he beats him with just his ingenuity.
Right. But we start with all of these one-liners right off the bat. And so we have this sense of superiority and like, war is fun and a joke and we're beating the bad guys. Who are the bad guys? Don't worry about it.
That was very much what I was conscious of on this view, was I was like, it's just some guys in a jungle. And I think they call them gorillas.
They
Like
call them
they're
guerrillas, but guerrilla warfare is like
right.
the
Yeah,
other one.
it's
But
like
like this is
it's just a South American rebel faction of some sort, right? Like it's just
yeah,
sort of
like I said, this
it's
has a
vague.
lot to say. I think about the like Contra stuff we're getting that the United States is getting into in South America at this
Yep.
time. Obviously, Nicaragua is a big part of that, and like
Yeah.
some Central American countries as well. Like it, this is playing on a pastiche that is in the news at the time,
Well,
which I found
it
interesting.
also
And like we don't have the context for
it's this
necessarily.
interesting idea of these guys are, Carl Weathers is the shady government guy, but also these guys aren't asking a whole lot of questions about who they're being sent out to kill either. Our heroes are
Right.
just sort of going like, we got pointed at a thing. We're weapons.
Well, yes and no, because like Dutch specifically does have that scene at the very beginning when they're like, "Hey, man, why didn't you sign up to do that thing in the Middle East?" And he said, not our scene. We're
That's true.
a rescue team, not assassins."
That so I mean they yeah that is I mean that is true. They I mean and is that about as close to a save the cat moment as you might say? You start to go like, all right, okay, Dutch specifically of the group, right? And he is the leader, so that boils
Yeah.
down to all of them. But they do make a point of there's some sense of morality to this guy. There's some sense that he's going like, yeah, no, he's turning
Yeah, I
some stuff
mean,
down.
if this movie has a save the cat moment, which for those who don't know, in like screenwriting, there is this
Yeah.
term called save the cat, in which you have your character do some sort of heroic action early on that establishes that they're a good person.
Right, and I think that's as close to this as get. Is it just tells you like, okay, Arnold at least is not a total mercenary.
Right. Because yeah, who are these guys? What military do they work for? Very unclear.
Very unclear. Let's keep going through these guys. We've got so Jesse Ventura is Blaine. I think once again he's like, yeah, I play Sergeant Blaine in the movie. Once again, it's just like, all right, Jesse, you play Jesse Ventura. Let's be honest, it's just you
Yeah.
with a big gun. By the way, a gun so 80s that he's got that mini gun that it should be mounted on the side of a helicopter, not just carried around by a man.
Sure.
But the great and maybe my favorite performance, actually, Bill Duke in this movie as Mac.
Bill Duke is the one who's going full Heart of Darkness in this
His
film.
descent
And I love
into
him.
insanity is so good. And he already starts a little unhinged with, by the way, totally came from him, the shaving with the disposable razor throughout the whole movie. Total addition by Bill Duke.
Good for him.
Who is not only a great actor but also a filmmaker in his own right. I highly recommend a movie he directed called Deep Cover with Lawrence Fishburne. That is a very good unsung 90s crime movie. But Bill Duke is one of those guys who's just been in everything.
Totally. Yeah. He's one of those faces where you see him and go, yeah, I've seen him in something. And you probably have.
Yeah.
And it might be Predator.
It probably easily could be Predator. Because he, like I said, he's a real standout here because, yes, he's the guy who starts to lose it. We've got Sonny Landham as Billy, who is I mean, once again, though, it works on the thing, but he is sort of the trope of the Native American tracker, right?
Yeah, yeah. And again, these guys are all just tropes from top
That's
to
the thing.
bottom.
That's the thing where I sort of go like, it's more forgivable in this because it's like everything is being painted with a very broad stereotypical brush purposefully.
I appreciate that they don't have him speaking in a stereotypical accent or wearing feathers.
No,
or
I actually think they
anything
write
like
him
that.
pretty well for giving him the part of the team you expect. I actually think he's a halfway decent character for what he's supposed to be.
And again, halfway decent in like
They're all
half
so
of a
thinly-
gallon is more than half of a can of soda, right? And like
Yeah.
all the characters here are written so shallowly that well written needs to be qualified
Well,
with like they're not egregiously offensive except for
it's-
Jesse Ventura.
It's somewhat similar to and purposely he is meant to be the offensive guy, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
That's the thing about it. It is all very smart. And like I said, I do chalk a lot of that up to Shane Black, who has. I say that simply because having seen every other thing he's made, that is very much what he does. He plays. He's a guy who knows all the tropes of genre and loves to poke at them and have fun with them. And this is the guy who wrote Last Action Hero. Once again, like
Yeah. And look, we'll get to Shane Black's Predator movie, which I know is a compromised film,
Yeah.
but it's funny that like we're lauding him, and yet when we get to the movie he directs,
Although I will say all the stuff, to give me a preview of my opinion of that movie a little bit, all the stuff that works in that movie is the Shane Black stuff. If I think the character scenes are great, like all the comedy really works. I think the ensemble in that is really solid. It's the actual Predator action stuff where it falls apart for me. Then there's Pancho. Richard Chavez is he's kind of just the other guy.
Yeah, he's around. He's got some okay lines, and he has that good rejoinder to "I don't got time to bleed" that Jesse Ventura gives him when he says, "Well, you got time to duck," as he throws a grenade.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but when I look here, I'm looking at the cast photo of them all, and they look cool as hell. But I am just going like, oh yeah, and then that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he was just like a guy who shows up in stuff.
Yeah.
Actor.
Oh yeah. I know. I mean,
he's in
everyone,
a bunch of TV shows, and
everyone in this is a character actor who's worked a ton. I mean, like all the faces in this are pretty familiar. Because yes, we do also have Shane Black as Hawkins, the funny guy.
He's the funny guy. He's got the big glasses. He's constantly telling pussy jokes.
Yeah, and also the guy who was he like to communicate? I mean, you're saying like Shane Black isn't built like the rest of these guys.
He's the radio guy. Whenever they say, "Hey, get a call out," they turn to Hawkins.
And that was McTiernan's idea too. McTiernan's like, if we're gonna put Shane Black, I want to give him these giant glasses and really completely make him a huge nerd. Like, I really want to make it. If Shane Black already doesn't fit in with these guys, I want to make it even more so, to the point, once again, of it being almost a cartoon of. And you've got to love that in their very weird sitcom cast credits, which have always fascinated me, at the end of the movie, what's he doing? He's reading a comic book, which is probably just what Shane Black was doing, knowing Shane Black,
If this movie had been made 10 years later, he would be the quote-unquote hacker of the team.
100%. This guy would have some kind of laptop in a, camo bag, right? I just broke into the satellite network, Dutch. Yeah.
You mentioned the credits here with like the weird smiling to camera.
It is.
I believe it's the Family Ties theme that it syncs up perfectly to.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, you can go and find that. It's so fun, but it always was just like, because you do go like, they all died. Horrible.
And the only one who doesn't smile at the camera is Schwarzenegger,
who lives. So
yeah,
interesting.
Read into that what you will.
Yeah. By the way, no surprise here. Huge fans of this movie, the Duffer Brothers, because
shocker,
Hawkins is the name of Shane Black's character. It's also the town where that takes place. And what's the name of the dead chopper pilot they find? Hopper. Which they have. I've heard them say, "Oh, that's absolutely where we took it from." Because I think Arnold even says, "I knew Jim Hopper."
Yeah.
So it's actually Jim Hopper is a reference to this movie. And then we've got the guy who's sort of the other leading man here, right? Is Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers. Yeah.
Yeah. And
we also haven't mentioned Elpidia Carrillo. Carrillo? I don't know how to say her last name.
Oh yeah, well yeah, she ends up, of
Carrillo.
course, she ends up becoming our female lead of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, she has just enough lines to like convey that this thing is scary and has maybe been here for a while.
Yeah. She's great in this though, because she is unfortunately the woman, and I mean that literally. She is the only woman in this movie.
Yeah. Well, we also established through her that like, okay, the Predator is only killing people it deems as like worthy of hunting.
Yes.
Why Schwarzenegger goes out of the way to make sure she doesn't get a gun and yet keeps his own has always struck me as odd in this film.
Yeah, that feels like an interesting, strategic choice in his part for a guy who is pretty smart in a lot of other parts of the movie.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can call it sexism, call it what you will, but like reads as like the one big dummy move that these guys make once they actually know what they're dealing with. It's just like, well, why not everybody throw their guns away and not act like something this thing wants to hunt
That does
if they're
seem like
just
that
trying
would
to
be the
survive?
best. I mean, I think you could argue that speaks to the ego of these guys, but it does at a certain
Yeah,
point feel insane.
yeah.
Because I mean, we do
But
that is something that's established and will continue through these is that the predator doesn't, doesn't hunt down. It only hunts those who are equal alphas to it.
well, or maybe
Or
what could be perceived as that, or something that is like trying to put up a fight.
right, yeah,
Because I mean, we'll get into it in later Predator stuff, but like, there's people who like, okay, did they really pose a threat to the Predator? Like, the perfect example I think in this movie is Billy on the tree bridge with the
yeah,
knife when
yeah.
he stays behind. It's like, okay, Mr. Predator, is this guy really like who you want to be
Yeah, the
hunting
predator does
down?
sort of go like, I only fight equals or assholes. Right? So he's kind of a dick to me. I'm also going to take them out too while I'm at it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, we'll get into it in Predator 2, but like the people that the Predator is killing at the beginning of that movie is just like, really? That's who you're going after?
well,
Okay.
yeah, and I you haven't seen the Shane Black movie. Holy shit, does that get into some really weird lore about the hierarchy of predators?
Okay, great.
Good lord. There's some
Look,
interesting.
I am all here to learn some of that deep Ute Joe lore.
Yeah, that's right. You okay? I knew it. I knew Gorgoni would have the name of the because of course we just call them predators, but they do have a
Yeah.
name, and that's got to come from a novel or comic. I don't think I've ever heard it in a Predator movie.
I do not believe it has ever been spoken in a Predator movie.
No,
Let me try to find where it originates from real
it's
quick.
got to be a novel. It's got to be a novel or a comic. That's what I'm positing. It's got to be right.
I mean, you're probably correct. Wow, this Wikipedia article is long.
Oh, of
Um,
course. I mean, because that is the thing with these, and one of the reasons we're doing them on the IP Squad is so much has been expanded from these movies. So
mhm.
many. I mean, I've read some, but nowhere near scratch the surface of Alien or Predator or Alien versus Predator. I mean, you just type that into Amazon under books. Holy shit,
Oh,
the amount of stuff you'll find.
man, I really like the original Stan Winston designs on this creature. But anyway, um,
Oh yeah,
I'm trying to find where the
when it was Van
name
Damme.
actually originates
We
from.
haven't. We should touch on that if you're talking about the original design, because you also know the original
Yeah.
person cast as the Predator was Jean Claude Van Damme.
Hmm. All right. The predator species is never given a name in any of the films in which it appears,
There you go.
with the creatures simply being referred to as the predator both on screen and in the film's credits. In Predator, Ana Gonzalez refers to the character as El Diablo que Hanse transform the demon who makes trophies of men.
That's a good name for it.
Um, let's see. The term Yaucha is first used in Alien versus Predator: Prey, which is a comic book,
Makes sense.
which is
Yes.
itself a novel adaptation of the original Alien versus Predator comic. Okay, so it's the novelization of the original comic.
Yeah, that adds up. That adds up. Um, but just to get back to the Elpidia Carrillo, in this, she's coming off of having done Oliver Stone's Salvador before this, which was like a really prestige Oscar, appreciated movie. So it's a really interesting jump.
Hmm.
And then we just recently, I forgot it was her. She plays Jaime Reyes' mother in Blue Beetle.
Oh snap! You're right.
Yeah, she's so once again, like everyone in this movie, a face you know. She's been in a million things and on all the shows, and so I mean, these are all. And I like McTiernan in the little documentaries. Goes, it's great. I never had to direct her once. He goes, she just knew everything to do, and I went, cool.
You love it when that happens.
Yeah, it does. I just. Meanwhile, I was always on Ventura's. No, yeah. I got a lot more questions about my character's motivation, John.
Now, what is his relationship with the United States government?
Oh man, because I mean, I gotta say, Jesse Ventura is currently my favorite total nut job, right? Because
Oh, such a long list, John.
But here's the thing I like about Ventura. This is why I like him. Number one, he's a left-leaning nut job, so immediately I'm a little bit more. And also, he's kind of harmless, like to a certain extent. Like he's kooky in a way that can be endearing, because I'm like, he's not like whipping up riots or anything.
Sure, but it's that sort of leniency towards conspiracy thinking
Yeah.
that got us to where we are today, John.
No, that's why it's that's why I appreciate him from afar. I mean, to a certain extent,
That's fair.
I don't indulge with any of it, but I do like, when you've got him out there bagging on Trump and stuff. You're like, Jesus, if Jesse Ventura thinks you're an idiot, I mean, my God.
No matter
Coming
who
to you
wins,
from
we
off the
lose.
grid, I will not reveal my location.
Look, and that's the thing with kooks like that. They were always well and good when they removed themselves from society
I think
and
that's-
lived on compounds in the middle of the woods.
I think that's another part of it, maybe too, is why I find him a little bit more endearing. Is at least he has the decency to stay out of society.
Look, if you do not want to participate in the social contract, that's great. Go do it out in the middle of nowhere.
I highly recommend any of his appearances on, or I should say, James Adomian's impression of him on Comedy Bang Bang. Living off the grid, Scott. He is just because he also, him as an actor is always fun. We did cover, I believe, one of his only starring vehicles over on back when I was doing the Action Shelf, which was Abraxas.
Oh, Jesus.
Abraxas Guardian of the Universe. A movie
Sure,
where
yeah.
it's mostly the two guys just saying each other's name. Abraxas Secundus.
You know what I love? Jesse Ventura trying to explain science fiction nonsense.
Yeah. I just want to quickly mention a couple of people who are weirdly involved in this, because that's about it for the cast. Quick note though of who played the Predator. Kevin Peter Hall is the actor in the suit, who sounded like he had the worst time of anyone on this movie, because he's wearing they say about a 200-pound bodysuit all in when you get
In horrible, humid jungle heat.
and they put him in water with leeches, and he really had a hell of a time on this thing. But the voice of the Predator is Peter Cullen. Optimus Prime is the voice of the Predator.
Now, I saw that credit in this movie, and it made me like really focus in on what it is exactly do the sounds the Predator makes, and how much of that is voice work and how much of that is sound design. And it's a real tough line, I think.
Well,
because like there's the bits where the Predator is mimicking people's voices, and those sound like slightly modulated, just cast recordings, right?
yes.
And then there's like all the weird clicking sounds it makes, and I don't know if that's someone actually making those noises or not.
The clicking and gurgling is Peter Cullen.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah. Not only does he do that, but he was the one who came up with it. They came to him and said, we need a sound for this thing. We need a voice for this thing. And he said he turned it down initially, going, I don't have anything. And then he was like, wait a minute, I think I've got... And you think about how, especially as this becomes a franchise, how fucking important that is and how distinctive all those sounds are. And that's all thanks to... I mean, he's Optimus Prime to us forever, but...
Sure.
Also, just one of the greatest voice actors who's ever lived. I mean, the guy's done a billion things outside of that.
And look, you and I both dabble in voice acting to one extent or another. I for like role-playing game D&D stuff, and you for like, I don't know, professional bullshit like reading audiobooks and being a part of a acclaimed old-time radio show.
Pshaw, yes.
But
yeah.
But hearing of an actor make weird sounds like that, I put like hit that and like the stuff D. Bradley Baker does for like animal noises of just like there's such an elasticity to the human voice. Fred Welker is another great example.
No, that's
but like as a youth, like trying to figure out how to make those noises with a person throat was just like that is another thing that expands the mind of like,
the other reason Cullen was hesitant to do this was he had done the voice of King Kong in the 1970s remake and had damaged his throat enough that he coughed up blood while doing that, apparently. So he was
Doesn't
hesitant to
surprise me.
do another creature sound
Mm-hmm.
because that had done so much damage to him. But I mean, once again, talk about that's the thing I've discovered in my career in voiceover is how minute you can get into what is a voiceover job.
Right. Yeah. Something as small as listing numbers as the voice on the elevator says what floor you're on.
Yeah, the
To
stand back from the closing doors on like a subway. That's an
yeah,
actor who got paid to say that.
all the way to the weird gurgling clicking sounds that the
Yeah.
predator makes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I love that.
Yeah, no, it's and the fact that it's one of the greats on this. I just love that Peter Cullen has some influence
Yeah.
on this. Probably
The fact that it's Optimus Prime.
yeah, probably unfortunately never paid for that creation in any of the following movies. I'm sure I'm sure the man does just fine. If only on Optimus Prime alone. My God, that keeps him in work. They always need him for a video game, cartoon, or theme park attraction.
Damn, he's 85.
He's been at it forever. I mean, the guy.
Forever.
Yeah, no, he's one of the folks, one of the best to ever do it. That's not no one's gonna fight me on that.
Man, yeah, just the number of credits he has as Optimus Prime is absolutely absurd.
Oh, I forgot. Of course, he's also Eeyore in the Winnie the Pooh stuff. So that's Disney money coming his way.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And now that I think about it, I am like, oh, those are kind of in the same tone, aren't they? They're both sort of deep down here, but one is more sad.
If Optimus Prime had a serious case of depression, it would kind of level out to Eeyore.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. You can kind of hear it. No, that guy. I mean, once again, what does he have? Just quickly here, 213 credits. Pretty good.
Yeah,
Pretty
not
good.
bad.
I mean, look, and he's still doing a voice on Invincible. Like he's still just working. It's incredible. So yeah, and then Arnold's got his buddies Franco Columbo, who was his bodybuilding mentor, and Sven Ole Thorsen in uncredited roles as random guys. Also, the helicopter pilot at the end of the movie who rescues him is Kevin Peter Hall, the guy in the Predator costume. They
finally stripped him out of that latex.
yeah, and who comes back? He's also the Predator in the next movie as well, in Predator 2.
I mean, that was basically his whole career was like a guy in weird monster.
Well, because he was also Harry and the Hendersons. Because he was 6'9". He was just he ended up 7'2". They talked that was in high school. He came into high school at 6'5", grew to 6'9", and ended up 7'2". He sadly died very young at 35.
Well, a lot of those like super tall guys have like real problems with body stuff.
Well,
older.
he was actually his was a tainted AIDS blood given to him in a transfusion. Yeah, just a tragic story. But remarkable work. It's the kind of thing, as I talk about this a lot on Meet the Monsters, and talk about it here, he brings so much to this character. We talk about it with Star Wars as well. People take for granted these people in suits as, whatever. It's just a guy in a suit. It's like, no, these are performances. You think about all the choices he has to make as the Predator in this movie, right? Every movement is part of that performance.
Well, and he did so much in that performance to establish what we know as the language of the Predator, right? Like how it moves, how it reacts, how it like handles its equipment is all in his performance.
And that he comes back in the second movie to further lay that down. So now, after two whole movies of it, everybody is borrowing from what he's doing. Anyone playing the Predator now, he built the physical language of that character. There's also a reason, that's the thing I always point out, there's a reason like horror fans like myself have a favorite Jason. You know, like there are things. Well, it's the thing where you go like, no, guy in a hockey mask. Yeah. But yeah, it's like no, but I'm a Kane Hodder guy. I like the way Kane Hodder plays Jason. You know, other people have other opinions. It's a very interesting thing. I can tell you who are the better Michael Myers. Like there's a whole thing to it. You can tell when it's like, this guy doesn't get it. You know.
Well, it's the way they move. It's the way they loom. It's the way they lurk. Like there is a language to it, like you say.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think people don't. it's the same thing. I mean, now the big thing is with the mocap, right? Where you go like, whatever, the computer's doing the acting. No, it's not. It's still an actor doing it.
Well,
It's you know.
You and I were talking about Andy Serkis a little
Yeah.
bit ago, and like that's such a pivotal change in the like realities of creature performance
God.
is the mocap stuff.
Yeah.
But there is still this respect for people who have mastered the language. So you will go to a guy like Andy Serkis when you're making a King Kong movie and being like, how do we play a giant ape?
Right.
Or, I mean, there was maybe a ridiculous amount of this stuff in the Lord of the Rings when you have Benedict Cumberbatch crawling around on the ground as Smaug.
Yeah.
But that there's still a respect for the physical performance that you can bring to a character as an actor.
It's one of those things where it's like you when it works, it's invisible, which unfortunately means that they don't get the credit that's due to them, right? Because I mean, the fact that Andy Serkis was never nominated for Gollum or his performance as Caesar is a crime. Like, I mean, this, and the fact that they were just like, well, no, that's not acting. You know, like you're like those are incredible performances.
You think about like Chewbacca or any of the Wookiees.
I mean, so much of Star Wars, right? There's so many characters in Star Wars. I mean, even the unfair amount of flack he took, but what Ahmed Best brought to Jar Jar Binks, right? I mean, like, you know, that's a totally different thing had that not been an actor playing it on set.
But you're talking something closer to like traditional mime or clown performance.
Absolutely.
Than you are what we think of as acting with enunciating your language and
it's the kind of
in dramatic scenes.
Doing Meet the Monsters is the kind of stuff Karloff brought to the Frankenstein monster, right? Like that. Another perfect example. Other people played that, and nobody was ever as good as Karloff at doing it.
Well, it's the metal rods they jammed in his legs, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a reason Karloff was like, I can't do any more of these. Please, for the love of God, let me die. No. He lived for a long time after doing it, but he was. I mean, it's other people playing RoboCop. You know, once again, it's like, sure, yeah, but you're like, yeah, but Weller just did it better, and Weller did work with. I don't know what Kevin Peter Hall's trained for this, but if you've watched, as I have, the insanely long RoboDoc. That's out there, which I highly recommend. It's really good if you're a RoboCop fan. But he talks about getting one of the premier mimes to come develop how RoboCop moved in the suit. I mean, there's a lot of thought that goes into these performances, and I think what Kevin Peter Hall does is great here. And also, similar to talking about the narrative progression, similar to the stripping of Arnold is the stripping of the Predator too. You know,
right. Well, and the most interesting scene in the movie is when the Predator chooses to strip down and fight one-on-one, mano-a-mano, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, one of the great monster reveals ever, right? When he takes the helmet off and it is such a great, I mean, it's not to the Giger level of the Alien, but it's that thing, once again, where you're just like, that face is so inhuman.
Yeah. You ugly son of a bitch.
Yeah. Another iconic one. It's actually ugly motherfucker, which is great because I mean, I like the stuff that became iconic when it's not even meant to be. I mean, get to the choppa is the ultimate example of that.
Sure, and it's a throwaway line.
He just says it. He's literally just screaming at someone to get to the helicopter. But because he says get to the choppa, there are people who wear shirts that say get to the choppa. One of the things I love about Arnold, and I've heard this from several people who've worked with him, is when you meet him on a set, he goes, "What do you want to hear? Is it get to the chopper? Is it?" He knows he's an icon. And he's just like, "Okay, I'll be back. Which is it? Just let's get it out of the way. I'll do the lines."
All right, John.
Yeah.
If you were going to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger and he asked you, "What do you want to hear?" and you only get one, what is it? Because I know mine.
Okay, this is a out of left field one, as you might expect from me. Why don't you let off a little steam from Commando when he kills the guy with the steam pipe? Just because everybody asks him, I would come at him a little differently.
I would go True Lies, so maybe also left
you're
field.
Fired?
No, but they were bad people.
They were bad people. Because You're Fired is one of my favorite Arnold one-liners.
Yeah, You're Fired is good. You're good.
That is good though. Oh, we mentioned it last week because of Cameron, but fucking True Lies is so good. God,
I
True
love that
Lies is
movie.
good. That is such a good. What a fun time. That is to me like an epitome of like a summer blockbuster. Just good time at the movies, man.
It has its issues. I think the third act drags a little bit, but I overall love that.
Yeah, yeah. It's very fun. Oh, well, the third act is all about Cameron just wanted that jet that took off vertically, and that was like
Yeah,
he built
yeah.
an entire third act to use it. But this movie, like we're saying, I mean, it is sort of a thing. I'm trying to go through here and go, what hasn't? Because this movie has been so discussed. It's so iconic.
Yeah.
It's so beloved. But yes, I think it's another example of it's so interesting because much like Alien, it doesn't immediately. You're not going like, oh man, I can't wait for round two. Like it feels so complete at the end. I also love at the end of the movie, it's not really a triumphant moment. Like they pick up Arnold and he is fucked up physically
the movie
and
ends
mentally.
with his like basically staring into the middle distance, covered in ash.
Yeah. And it has a real haunting kind of Vietnam movie ending, which is I wonder why if that was why they decided to do sort of the sitcom thing. Is like, well, we can't have people leaving the. This is 1987. We can't have the people leaving the theater like contemplating. Unacceptable.
Don't worry, everyone's smiling. Everybody's fine.
When they throw Carl Weathers that gun, he's like, ha ha, man, I'm fucking dead. By the way, the Carl Weathers death, one of the best deaths in this movie. I will forever think about the severed arm that's still on the trigger and shooting.
So, okay, that's one of I've got two big nitpicks with this movie.
Okay.
The first is why not throw your guns away because it's hunting you because you're also
Right,
equivalent hunter.
Right.
Second, the laser blast that knocks Carl Weathers' arm clean off just grazes Schwarzenegger.
It's just that tough.
Yeah, sure. Okay, fine. Whatever.
No,
I see it every time, though, and I'm just like, literally the last scene, it knocked his arm clean off.
And Arnold's just like, oh, it burns a little.
Ouchie.
Yeah. My muscles deflected most of it, though.
Sure, yeah, okay.
And no surprise here, there was a lot of competition on set between these fellas.
The muscle-bound jockheads had a little bit of competition.
Particularly Arnold and Carl Weathers were trying to see who could get bigger. But as Carl Weathers says in the documentary, while also never being seen working out. It was considered weak if anyone saw you in the gym. You needed to be the most pumped up guy, but it needed to be kind of mysterious. Like, I just look like this.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Arnold is so delighted to tell the story. He goes, Jesse, when they were measuring for his costume, the costume designer said, your arm is actually an inch bigger than Arnold's. And I said, and he came out and was so proud to tell me. I said, well, let's measure and bet on it. And of course, I won because I had paid off the costume designer to tell him that. He's recounting the story. Just like, it was the funniest thing I ever did.
Wow.
I just a mindset and world I can't understand. I'm in the Shane Black world, right, where it's just like, I'll be the guy with glasses reading a comic book.
Well, it's not even necessarily the like understanding personal fitness. It's the I need to get so swole and yet maintain this air of mystery about it. Today, you have these like fitness regimens that are talked about and analyzed and discussed, and what diets go with what exercise programs, and they revel in if they find some new revolutionary way of approaching bodily perfection, as whoever deems that to be true is. What Marvel fitness executive is in Chris Pratt's home this week, has it all figured out,
everything is
obviously.
a program. Everything has supplements involved and diet. These are guys who are just pumping iron, right? Like,
but can't be seen.
But can't
doing it for some reason. And obviously there's this whole like Mr. Universe aspect to it that like Schwarzenegger is trying to break away from. This idea that like, okay, the guys who are seen sculpting their bodies, that's all they're good for. They don't have any
I noticed it when I watched this because last season we did the Conan movies where he's gigantic. Here he had shed 25 pounds, and you can feel he's leaner in this than he normally is, which would make sense for this character. I also think it's a thing where I'm just thinking about like, well, I mean, the thing that actually always gets me, and I now see, and it was one of the things I really appreciate about Pratt, speaking of Chris Pratt, in his show, The Terminal List, is if you see these real Tier 1 operator Delta Force guys, they're not sculpted. They're beefy because it's all about strength. They're not show muscles, right? They're not working for definition. They're working to just be really strong. So they all have these thick necks, and you might call them fat guys if they kind of look like a Mike Gargani. I mean, to a certain extent, right? But I mean, they just
gonna measure my neck and the fact that it like has no clear definition between my ear and my shoulder.
Well, because when you're actually trying to just be super strong, you're not worrying about what are my delts doing, work on these abs. It really is just about I just need brute strength.
It's push-ups, sit-ups, and plenty of juice.
Right, that's the thing, where it's like, you can see Arnold has been like, yes, I was working on my back muscles, and today it's the triceps. And but the other thing you got to keep in mind, too, is Stallone had gotten leaner, so I also feel like these guys were just always battling each other. Who could get bigger, then who could get more sculpted. And then literally it was a thing where James Cameron told the story about Arnold was upset initially when he read the Terminator 2 script and he didn't kill anyone in it because he's like, no, Sly just killed 80 guys in his last movie. I have to kill 100 guys in this one. They would literally battle about who could kill more people in a movie. Everything about those guys was in running with each other. I do love that they are both older now and realize that they're both the dinosaurs. So now they make movies together and help each other out on stuff because they're like, oh shit, our brand is kind of out the window, so maybe we should team up instead of fighting each other. I mean, they both have streaming shows now, which kind of makes sense.
Where's that documentary, which is the rivalries to unity of the Schwarzenegger-Stallone relationship?
Oh yeah. That's because they each have had, of course, they still have a little bit of that because Schwarzenegger did a Netflix did a documentary about Schwarzenegger, and then a year later there was a Netflix documentary about Stallone separately because I think it was still hold on, wait a minute, I got a documentary, I gotta get a documentary around this. Pretty good. I had Over the Top out of it, but how'd Over the Top do against Predator?
I could only understand every third word, John. That's a great impression.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about the thing, man. Yeah. Both of I just love this was an era when we didn't need to understand our action because, as I said, Van Damme was supposed to be the Predator in this, and of course, very quickly he'll take off on his own. Understanding these men didn't matter, and especially the end of this movie, there's almost no dialogue.
I mean, other than Schwarzenegger shouting, "Kill me, kill me! I'm
what
right here."
What are you waiting for? Kill me! I'm right here.
That's one of the. You talk about the physical performance of the Predator in this movie, and Kevin Peter Hall brings.
Yeah,
and obviously some of this is the script and the directing as well, because you don't get this performance unless there's direction to do it.
Oh, I mean, McTiernan just directs the hell out of this movie.
But the moments that really separate Predator from any other run-of-the-mill monster movie is how intelligent the Predator acts, right? Every time it stops and considers its next move, it is setting itself apart from every other monster.
That moment when he's doing that and you see it be like, nah. I don't think that's a good idea. And then even still, I'm dead, I'm bleeding out, but I'm going to nuke you.
Yeah.
And then it calling back the laughing it heard earlier. What a fucking dick this thing is, too, right?
Oh yeah, the Predator's the worst.
I mean, we were talking about that, whether or not the sense of what's the alien or Predator, what is worse, because the alien is purely just trying to propagate its own kind, right? It's trying to make more aliens, which, okay, that's a pure animalistic instinct, which to us feels very evil because it is eschewing any kind of empathy for anything else.
Whereas the Predator has a code that it follows, but also it can be petty.
And it is that code inherently is based around murder.
Well, there's that too.
I mean, that's the thing is, and I think particularly when you get to Predators and it's kidnapping people to hunt them, it's like, all right, you've now reached a new level of shittiness.
Well, what's worse, abducting the Earth's greatest killers and removing them from the Earth population, or coming to Earth where you might have some collateral damage?
That is, I mean, but in that movie, it is you've got guys like Walton Goggins, where you're like, that guy's like a serial killer. Yeah, I guess you can take him. But like Adrian Brody's just like a soldier. He doesn't need to be taken out of society necessarily.
Wasn't Topher Grace the serial killer?
That is the reveal. Yes.
All right.
Walton Goggins is the guy who's actually in the like orange jumpsuit. I don't remember if he's a serial killer, but he's
right.
like on death row. And Danny Trejo's a like cartel assassin, like every other part he plays. Hey man, he just does it really well. All right, well let's turn to some highs and lows for this, because this is another one where you're like, who has a problem with this?
Oh man, if someone, I know what the problems are going to be. So can we just rip that Band-Aid off?
You want to start with the low?
Start with the. I mean, if you have a particular, if you always start with the highs, then start with the highs.
I always start from what our general position is.
Okay.
So that the second one is the more surprising one. And with especially with movies like this one, I find kind of shorter ones that are. So we'll go with Lotus Chief here. This is the high, who says titles their review, "The quintessential action movie, one of my favorite films of all time. Predator is the classic action film. What makes it so unique is that the story starts off as a simple but exhilarating rescue mission, but then it suddenly switches gears and becomes a fight for survival for everyone involved. The genius of that!" That's an exclamation point. "The cast is wonderful. Arnold as Dutch was very convincing and commanding, yet humbled and low-key in his performance. In moments," actually, that's an interesting point about the Arnold performance. Like you said, in the beginning, this is actually one of Arnold's best performances, because he's just giving you Arnold, and then the movie asks a little bit more of him than I feel like. And that's the thing about Arnold. You make fun of his voice and stuff, but his movie star, he does have a charisma inherently, but also he's a great action star because he knows how to physicalize a performance.
Well, and a lot of that's in his face. He has a very expressive face, and you can. I mean, this might sound slightly insulting. You can see the gears moving as he's thinking and making decisions as a character, but conveying that to screen is a challenge.
One of the best reviews I read of the remake of Total Recall, and no offense to Colin Farrell's an amazing actor, but as they talk about it, they go, yeah, but he just can't play the confusion that Arnold had. And that's the great thing about Total Recall, or a lot of Arnold is one of the great, like, I'm putting the pieces together actors. When you talk about the gears turning, they're like, what? Like Arnold's confusion in movies is some of the best ever. He's like, hold on, the situation's changed. And that's always such an action movie.
I'm pregnant? What?
Yeah, this makes no sense. I must teach this kid the garden class, but I am a cop. All right, that makes no sense.
When was this comedy switch? It wasn't that long after this. I think like Twins is 89.
Yeah, Twins has got to be pretty quickly after this. Yes. No, because at a certain point he did go like, but I'm also funny.
Mm-hmm. And he's not wrong.
No, I love Twins and Kindergarten Cop. I find delightful. Junior, it's not his fault though. It's not. Yeah, 88 is Twins. So I mean, pretty quick after this.
From the next year after this.
Yeah. He makes Twins and Red Heat, which is an action movie, but it's also a comedy, It's more comedic. So he definitely, people talking about it. Arnold is a genius businessman. He was so good at branding himself, obviously. All right. Okay. The only way you could know he's the star is that his face is on the cover. He's the leader of the group, and he survives. He's also just Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, anyway. He was one of the crew instead of a one-man wrecking machine like in so many of his other films. That was very nice to see. That is true. I mean, Colonel John Matrix, the titular commando, would have had this.
That name gets me every single time.
Colonel John Matrix. But in that movie, he kills like 150 guys single-handedly. This guy is a great soldier, but does have a team with him. John Matrix, they would have sent him into that village by himself. That guy is a comic book character. Anyway, the one thing that still astonishes me to this day is indeed the Predator. The special effects in this film were very much ahead of its time. The camouflage is pure genius. I mean that we didn't mention that, but not done digitally. That's an optical video effect. Which is and it's still really striking.
It added to the torturous filming in this situation.
It sure did.
Didn't they like slather him in a certain type of paint in order to achieve that effect?
Yeah, they covered him in red paint and then basically took out the red of it. Like it's a whole process. You can read all about it. It just sounds horrible as well. But what an iconic effect that they're still now using computers to create today. Yeah. Anyway, and the same, and the thermal vision is also not thermal vision. That is just people painted.
That's wild.
Yeah. Anyway, I still can't believe my eyes when I see the camouflage effects. It blows me away that even now I could sit alongside the FX scene in today's films with no shame. I'm waiting for Fox to put out a special edition. Oh, I think they did. So anyway, Predator's evidence of action film should be a great story and a relentless action, all progressing the story along. A timeless classic, one of the best films of all time. 10 out of 10 stars. Yay, we all agree.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, I mean, no notes. But, I don't know. SD Davis 63 disagrees. Titles the review. I found it tedious. There are guns and other weapons ablazing in this sci-fi, and then this is in quotes, thriller about an alien creature who's single-handedly wiping out an entire military team sent into the jungles of Central America to rescue some hostages. With all that, it sounds strange, but I found this tedious viewing all the way through. To me, it's most noteworthy for having 2 future governors in the cast. The story itself was repetitious all the way through. A traipse through the jungle while being stalked by a monster, and the dialogue, as one might expect with this kind of movie, was weak. Vehement disagree about the dialogue in particular. Schwarzenegger was really called upon to do very little except look tough, which admittedly he does well, and I wondered, as any thinking person would do, why the creature didn't just kill Dutch when it had him by the throat, pinned against the tree. I suppose because that would have taken away the chance to have the really cool ending with the huge explosion, and then Arnold standing victoriously in a macho pose as he looks around the carnage. Wow, total misread of that moment. Tedious sums up all I need to say about this from my perspective. 1 out of 10 stars. Boy, talk about a person who clearly is winning arms folded on this, right?
The word tedious,
yeah,
is defined by Webster's Dictionary. No. In this TED Talk, I will speak to.
Yeah.
I think there is a certain predilection to dismissal of action films by a subset of viewers.
Oh, God,
yeah. I say this because I feel like we're going to be building a theory of the case where this is concerned as the series goes on, because we will have this pendulum swing between attempts at horror and attempts at action, right? And it goes back and forth throughout this franchise.
I'd say Predator, more than any of them, stays basically in the action genre.
Right.
More so than Alien.
But there is this type of viewer, and look, I'm guilty of this with different genres as well, but that can be completely dismissive of a whole genre of film based solely on its aesthetics, right? So the minute you see a large muscular man, and a team of them at that, wielding guns and trading one-liners, you immediately dismiss any other media literacy you might apply to this film.
Right. No, we've talked about this. It is one of the... Actually, it's interesting that you talk about shifting between action and horror, because I would say they're probably the 2 most written-off franchises. Both of them are written off as, schlock.
Yeah,
in general.
And that's the thing.
And sure, there's plenty of that in them, but to act like there's not also terrible entries in every single genre is insane. To think that some genres in here. The thing is, the language of action movies, and we talked about this last week, and I feel like it's if it's a running thing about anything I do on podcasts, it's this. It's just that action as a genre and actually horror, they're 2 of the more visually driven genres in film.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a certain kind of person, and I think this person might be it, and I think we've heard from the person who didn't like Aliens for the same reason, who sees that as inherently low brow, even though it's just engaging in the medium with different tools. But it's seen as less literate, therefore dumb.
Sure. Because it doesn't use expressions of language and words, and the character interactions solely come down to how a character physically responds to a situation. And
Right.
that's true in horror and in action movies, where the character choices being made are not in an expression of dialogue or open, I mean, generally weeping emotions of one kind or
Right.
another. It is in response to fear and stress, and how the character responds to that is the character action and the traits that they are building.
Well, it's what we're talking about with Schwarzenegger, right? When I hear people go like, "Oh, Schwarzenegger, that guy can't act," I'm like, "No, no, don't." He can't do certain things. Or Keanu Reeves is another example of this too. We're talking about Schwarzenegger, but I always am defending Keanu because I'm like, oftentimes when Keanu is bad in a movie, it's because he's being misused by that movie. He has a specific skill set that makes him a great actor. People often think, people just narrowly focus on particularly acting in a certain way. And I think things like the Academy Awards are guilty of this, where the people who tend to win those are the people who tend to scream and cry the most, thereby being, as you talk about, those outward emotions. It's like, well, that's what acting is. If you're crying on screen, that's good acting.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's a piece of a thing.
Right. Well, but it makes performances like Schwarzenegger's undersold in like a cultural sense, which
Yeah.
I find interesting. And obviously, guys like you and I are constantly pushing back against that and trying to be vocal about it.
Yeah.
But there is this overwhelming, not overwhelming. There is this like very verbal component to film criticism, especially when it comes to run-of-the-mill user reviews on IMDb,
Well, yes.
that speak to this consensus that has been built in, that like, oh, if a bunch of guys with guns go into the jungle, it's just the same thing over and over again, totally ignoring the shift in tone that this movie has, or like I said, the symmetry of like people stripping themselves down in order to overcome a technologically superior foe, or
There's a
like
lot.
the subtle shifts in dialogue that come from slowly losing all of our one-liners throughout the
No, I mean,
movie
listen, this
until
is
it's
made
almost a
by
non-verbal performance.
This is made by really talented people putting a lot of thought into every move of this movie. This is not just a top. What follows both Alien and Predator are a ton of ripoffs that are the dumbed down versions of this, and we'll be talking about some of those on our Patreon. But like, that's the thing, is like, it's very easy to just. But looking at the contemporary reviews from the time, it got mixed to middling reviews from critics going like, yeah, Arnold goes out there with his big guns. I gotta say, a guy who, one of the reasons I love him is often met things on the level they should be. Roger Ebert had the most positive review of this movie of any of the things, where he's just like, this is effective, well done action filmmaking. And he was one of the few major critics who could be like, look, this is genre fare, but this is really good genre fare.
Right. And you're meeting a movie where you're not expecting a movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger that's called Predator to be fucking Amistad.
That is in no way its goal, and it shouldn't be. That's the thing that always gets me, is it's just like, should all movies be trying to be Citizen Kane? Because that would get pretty boring pretty fast, and most would fail miserably.
Yeah.
Like, and you'd go insane as a filmmaker trying to always make a masterpiece every time out the gate.
It's wild to me because you have a medium that is filmmaking, and the same is true with music and books and whatnot. And treating the entire medium as a monolith just always blows my mind. And it's something that you and I have struggled with for decades at this point. Because we were talking about comic books, people consider that a genre unto itself, which it isn't.
Oh God, that drives me insane. There's nothing that even calling superheroes a genre is tough, right? Like, because within that you can get any number of things. Yeah, no. I mean, I feel like we're not alone in being fans of genre, quote unquote. Even the fact that it's called genre fare, right? It's just like, and by that is. But when they say everything is a genre, but when they say genre fare, they mean sci-fi, horror, fantasy, right? And those are the lesser. Those are lesser.
Well, because
it's low. That's low literature.
I'm always reminded of that scene from They Came Together, the Paul Rudd, Amy Poehler movie.
Brilliant.
Like, you read fiction books? I read fiction books.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. You do start to get into this thing about like, yeah. And it's one thing if you have a preference for something, because a lot of the high-minded stuff I just don't care for. Like a lot of the stuff that's really, I've always said this, like if it's going to be like an 1800s drawing room romance, I'm just not interested. I don't bag on it, but in general, I'm probably not going to be drawn to it.
You know what I would love to turn on a Saturday morning before I talk about it with a friend? The movie Predator.
Yeah.
You know what I don't want to do that with?
Yeah.
Citizen Kane.
There's a lot of movies I see. There's a lot of movies where it's like, these are the best movies of the year. And 9 times out of 10, if you look at somebody's top 10 list, 9 of those movies, I'm like, oh, yeah, that looked interesting. I haven't gotten to it yet. Because, when I sit down to watch a movie, I'm not going to go like, oh, is this like a weepy indie drama? I mean, I'm interested, but, no, I'm going to end up watching this Korean martial arts movie or something like that. It's like,
now, give me a weepy indie drama where one of those characters is a zombie. Now we're talking.
well, that is an interesting thing where it is very, and I think we're starting to see more and more of that of people. And the thing that, of course, always drives me insane, and I'm so glad that a guy we both like quite a bit, Jordan Peele, always pushes back on this idea of the elevated horror movie.
Yeah.
The idea of like, oh, you critics or film snobs like some horror movies, so you have to find some way to argue they're not horror movies. And just like, no, these are horror movies. If you like the X, Pearl, and Maxine trilogy, those are fucking slasher movies. They're really, really good ones, but you can't take away that they are still horror films, and specifically slasher films of that. They're great. But yeah, it's such an interesting thing. I guess I've never had that sort of like, well, I mean, look, I'm on the record as liking a lot of stuff that people think is shit. So, I've just never had that thing where it's like, in terms of, I'm like, wow, I can't be seen to like gobbledygook.
I don't know. Like, I definitely had that sort of. I think music is more where that opinion comes out in me. Like, especially growing up when I was such a like metal and classic rock head.
Yeah.
And I could not be seen associating with the hips and the hops and the country fair. I would never dare to do such a thing as listen to pop music. What?
Yeah.
What?
Sure.
No.
I think if anything, we maybe probably slid the other way, right, on that, where it's like, this is very popular in a sense, and we're too cool for school. We like the weird shit.
Sure, but to be dismissive of things is something that we all are guilty of from one time or another.
And particularly at a younger age, there's no question.
Yeah.
I
think one thing that we're going to keep regularly seeing in these 1-star reviews is people who are maybe, like you say, going in arms crossed, where these movies are such like interesting tent poles of the culture at the time, even when they are bad movies. Like, we'll get into the latter day Alien films and some of the Predator films as well, of just like them trying to grasp what made these things popular to begin with and failing. And those are interesting experiments in trying to find the roots of these, like, elevated genre pieces.
Yeah.
And recapturing those. And so I don't know. I don't want to reiterate this conversation every single movie going forward, because we very easily could.
Well, but I think next week we might. Well, first I should mention our Patreon, where we are talking about maybe some of the lesser inspired by movies / ripoffs / one that I think is pretty good. The 3 movies we're talking about over there are going to be an interesting mix. One I've never seen or even heard of prior to this, so our Predator knockoff, but
that is available via YouTube.
Yeah, because it was a TV. We're basically going to be watching the TV movie version of Predator over on our Patreon. So head over there, because you can get cool exclusive content from this show and all the shows on the Punch Up Entertainment Network. That's patreon.com/punchupent. That's Punch Up ENT. Like I said, hours and hours of exclusive content.
Don't be hasty unless you're going to our Patreon page.
But bringing that to next week, a movie that I think is not as loved as this one, but I in particular have a real affinity for, which is Predator 2.
I am so curious to come back to this movie. It has been over 10 years.
Wow. It's because I also watch Predator 1 and 2 a lot. I also I'm one of those guys who goes to Predator 2. And I find that this is one where there's a cult fan base. Like, I'm not like way out on my own on this, but it's a lesser thing, but there are people who really like this movie, including myself. which
Okay.
I think the aesthetics of stuff I like. That's probably not too much of a shock. Um,
Gritty crime drama plus Predator
yeah,
equals John Campbell?
yeah. I'll give you the tagline as I always do. This is one of those with a above title tagline and a below title tagline. All right, so here's the above the title tagline: silent, invisible, invincible, the ultimate hunter. This time, Los Angeles, 1997. Predator 2. Then I really like this. He's in town with a few days to kill. Thanksgiving coming this Thanksgiving.
Bring the family.
Yeah, gather up. You finish up your Thanksgiving meal, and then you go watch the Because I will say, things about Predator 2. Oh, it's so much more lurid. Like there's so much more brutality in Predator 2.
Oh, I mean, it is firmly a 90s film from what I remember of
Yes, it is firmly, yeah. No, you do really see the switch between 80s action and 90s action with it. The urban setting, the cop main character. We'll talk.
The fact that there's a Busey involved.
Oh man, you were just waiting. Is this the first time? Yeah, I believe this is the first time the IP squad will be talking Busey.
Oh boy.
And I will tell you now, it won't be the last. But we also get Bill Paxton back, one of the rare people who's in both Alien and Predator movies.
Yeah.
You got a Paxton in this. You got an Adam Baldwin in it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you got it's an interesting group. You get the only returning cast member, and it's interesting. As many times I've seen it, I still only vaguely remember that she's in it. Is Elpidia Carrillo is in Predator 2.
Well, isn't she the one who gives the breakdown of the events of
I think,
the
yeah,
movie?
if I remember correctly, it's like a thing where they like see a tape of her giving testimony about it. We'll talk about why Arnold's not in it, and Arnold has never returned to this franchise, which is very interesting, despite a few attempts here and there. But yeah, we'll get to all that. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of the IP Squad. Until next week, the case file is closed.